Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I have with me a longtime friend and guest of this channel, Tim Durling. Of course, he is one of the most prolific authors that I know, and he just came out with his I'm sorry, First Kansas was the first one that I participated in. Prior to that, I know you had the Y&T book, you had the Unspooled book, most recently the Night Ranger book, of course, which we had you on here to discuss. And then the Sammy Hagar book was before that one, which is an excellent read. I've got three bathrooms in my house, and I've got like two of your books in each bathroom. So that's saying something, but you've got a new book out. I can't even believe this. It's like the Night Ranger book just came out, and you've got the Sound That Haunts You, which is a beginner's companion to Fleetwood Mac. So, welcome, Tim. And how did this idea all come about?
Thanks, Jeff. This is a book that I was probably working on this and the Night Ranger book at the same time. I always try to have something ahead. And this book came around it wasn't one I was planning on doing. It started off as sort of an offhanded comment that my mother-in-law made. She said, "Tim, when are you going to write me a Fleetwood Mac book?" And I don't think she was serious about it, but it got me thinking, like, well, how would I do a book about this band? There's certainly been lots of books. I think there's just been a couple that came out this year. One's got a terrible AI cover, but I don't want to get into that. Um, but I thought, how would I approach something like this? And the fact of the matter is that I've only really been a fan of Fleetwood Mac for about 12 years now. So my wife Sarah introduced me to this band. I say introduced, like obviously I knew who Fleetwood Mac was from an early age, listening to the radio and stuff, but I'd never checked them out. They weren't really in my wheelhouse. I always thought, well, they've got catchy songs, and I liked a song here or there, but I never really dove in. I didn't really know anyone that was a hardcore fan before. And she would just play me some mixed songs. And, as fans know, there are a lot of different Fleetwood Macs. There's the early stuff, the bluesy stuff, there's the Bob Welch era, the early 70s. Obviously there's the hit making era, and then there's what came after, which is more than what people think. So I thought, well, why don't I do this book from the perspective of me coming at it from more of a hard rock fan and, just a classic rock fan in general, um, as if I was trying to help someone do what I did and get into this band. How do you do it? Where do if you're curious to go farther than, the self-titled or Rumors or the greatest hits, where do you start? Because there's so many albums. There's different versions of albums between the North American and the UK versions. There's lots of compilations with extra songs on them. Where do you start? So I thought, okay, I'll do an album by album look at the band. And this one is like my Sammy Hagar book in that it's all me. All the writing in here is for me, except for the forward, which is Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility did the forward, which I'm very grateful for. Uh, and it's just my honest opinions. First of all, I'm presenting the albums. Here's all the songs on them. Here's who played on them, and here's what I think of them. And I just go through the entire Fleetwood Mac discography, like mainly the studio albums, but I think I say that I think and I hope that I covered every officially released song that they ever did, which is a lot. So yeah, that was the I thought I could do something with that. So I just started writing a chapter at a time or an album at a time, and I did not do it in order. I jumped all over the place, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to come into each album fresh. I didn't want it to say, well, this one sounds much like the two before it. Um, so I went all over the place. As a matter of fact, Rumors was one of the very last ones I did the chapter on, and because I was a little intimidated, because like, what am I going to say? What can I possibly say about Rumors? I
Yeah.
mean, this is an album that's had books written just about this album, but no, I'm pleased with how it came out in so many ways. I'm very happy with how it came out. It has a different look than my previous books, and that's by design. I wanted it to have a really, really different look to it. The cover art is courtesy of my wife's best friend, Sally Ann, who's not a professional artist, but she had done a couple of sketches, like pencil sketches, for a couple of our older pets, one of our dogs and cats that are no longer with us, and they came out really well. So I thought I had this concept. You know, you've seen those pictures a million times on the internet with a kid listening to headphones, and it'll say, "Remember the first time." It'll say whatever album. They change the album all the time. So I wanted a variant of that. I wanted a penguin because Fleetwood Mac always uses penguins as their mascot. So I thought, well, okay, we'll have a penguin with headphones holding on to a Rumors record, listening to Fleetwood Mac. And I love how it came out. I think it's a beautiful hand spun design. Absolutely no AI content here. I'm getting more and more militant about that because it's ruining everything. People are like
Hmm.
sharing things that are like, take a look at it. This is obviously like, look at it for more than 2 seconds. It's obviously fake. So anyway, enough about that sermon. Um, but yeah, very happy with how it came out, and I think it is a good companion to anybody that wants to explore further. I mean, I also think that there are a lot of Fleetwood Mac fans that aren't familiar with the earlier stuff because it's so different. But if you're willing to take that plunge, I can kind of get you started. Here's what you can expect.
Yeah. Now, do you include the Buckingham Nicks
I
album in
do.
this?
I did. I actually, that's sort of an inset in between the um, the album they put out in 1974 called Heroes Are Hard to Find and the 1975 self-titled album. So I put that in between as an inset because I describe it in the book as quite possibly the most elaborate demo tape ever created.
Hmm.
Because as fate had it, Mick Fleetwood heard it. It was not a successful album. It came out in 73 on Polydor. It was a complete flop, and only just this year has had an official reissue that Rhino finally put it out. I don't know why it took so long, but I talk about it because it's it's not a Fleetwood Mac album, but yet it's not a Fleetwood Mac album. And I say that you could put that album on if you had a bunch of people gathered around and you just had music playing in the background. Most folks, most average listeners would just think, "Oh, that's Fleetwood Mac. It's just songs that I've never heard before."
Hmm.
It's missing Christine, it's missing her vocals, it's missing, like, Mick Fleetwood has a pretty distinctive sound on the drums, but other than that, and plus there are songs on there that would have a life beyond that album, like Crystal, for example, and then don't Let Me Down Again. That's one that they would do in concert with Fleetwood Mac. So yeah, I did include that one, and I also included at the very end the album that Lindsay and Christine did in 2017, because as far as I'm concerned, that's a Fleetwood Mac album. It's got
Hmm.
John McVie and Mick Fleetwood on it. That's a Fleetwood Mac album in all but name. And I have to think that there was some contractual obligation with Stevie that kept that from having a Fleetwood Mac band, which is a shame because I think it's a good album and it would have obviously with the brand name on it, it would have had a wider audience. But I think it's quite good and I wanted to talk about it. So there are a few albums like that that are kind of contractually not given a band name, but they really are. I mean, a famous example, of course, is Black Sabbath when Dio came back and they called it Heaven and Hell. Well, I mean, it's Black Sabbath. It's the
Right.
Dio era of Black Sabbath, or the last album that Steve Lukather put out a couple years ago called Bridges. Contractually, they couldn't call it a Toto album, but he's on it. Joseph Williams is on it. Shannon Forrest is on it. David Page is on it. Like, it's a Toto album, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, I did include those two albums, and like I said, I tried to be as thorough as I possibly could so that somebody would go, well, I've got my work cut out for me, but maybe I'll get this one and then I'll grab this one and see what happens.
Now, are you a fan of all their eras, or is there a certain era, like maybe the Jeremy Spencer era, where you're like, it's not
Well,
my
you
to my
know,
taste, but
as we're filming this, it's just about to start because every time I put out a book, I always do a deep dive series. And this time, my wife Sarah's sitting in with me for at least the bulk of it, which is a lot of fun because it's really this is her fault. um, but I'm not a blues aficionado. I'm not. And I know that's a dirty word. People are like, how dare you? And like, I have so much respect for blues as a genre because I know that the majority of the music that I listen to wouldn't exist if it weren't for the blues. I mean, that's the first thing people learn how to play is the blues progressions It's just that I'm not savvy enough with the blues to be able to pick one song up from the other. It doesn't take long for it all to start to sound the same to me, and
Hmm.
especially the first two Fleetwood Mac albums in that early period, the 67, 68 period. So you've got the self-titled debut from 68, and then you got Mr. Wonderful, but then you've also got the compilation. This is where it was really confusing. This era, their career was the hardest part for me. I really had to think about how I was going to do this. But then they had in the UK they had the Pious Bird of Good Omen came out, which had some songs that were the same and some that were different. And then in North America we get English Rose, which again some the same, some different. And then there are songs like Man of the World that were like standalone singles and they did never belong to an album. So it
Hmm.
got really confusing. But I'm gonna say actually, like we talked about off camera, I literally just got this on vinyl, the Then Play On record, which is the third Fleetwood Mac album, and it's the last one that Peter Green was on. I really like it because with that album they branch out into something different. Now, I'm not saying I don't like any of the stuff on the first two albums, but I could take it in doses. Like I like Stop Messing Around and Rollin' Man, and it's there's nothing wrong with it. It's well played. It's. I recognize the influence that they had on Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith, and like so many bands were influenced by the early Fleetwood Mac. Um, I've gained, every time I do one of these books, I have to do some serious listening to the albums. I need them ingrained here so I can write about them without listening to them. And if I'm stuck on something, might have to go back and listen to a song. I've gained a real appreciation for the Bob Welch era. So from 1971 to 74, which is one, two, three, four, five albums. I mean, very prolific. An album like Bare Trees, if I was going to rank the Fleetwood Mac catalog, that might be a top five album for me now. I really like the Bare Trees record. Mystery to Me is a great album. I mean, Hypnotized is such a cool, cool song. And it's very important. That era is very important because if you went directly from the first couple of Fleetwood Mac albums into the Buckingham Nicks era, you'd never in a million years guess that it was the same uh, entity. I hesitate
Hmm.
to say band because it's pretty much different personnel, but the Bob Welch era is a bridge, a very good bridge to that era. And some of those albums did sell quite well over time. There's a couple of platinums and a gold record there, which is good. And then I have to say though, and I don't think it's much of a spoiler because I have really yet to talk to anybody that has any time at all for Time, which is the album they put out in 1995. That is just that's you have to read the chapter on it, but I don't think I'll be listening to that much.
And that's the one without Lindsey Buckingham, right?
Well, there were two that they did. So there's Behind the Mask that came out in 1990. That was when Lindsay left. Stevie was still in the band. By the time that Time came out in 1995, Stevie was gone. It's basically it's John McVie, Christine, Mick. They brought in Dave Mason from
Wow.
Traffic and a solo artist in his own right. They brought in Becca Bramlett, and at the beginning of the album. Um, they had no guitar player, so Michael Thompson, the studio guitarist, plays on some of it, and then Billy Burnett came back because he and Rick Vito left. So it's a real hodgepodge of a lineup, and the songs are just completely unmemorable. And the most telling thing about that album is that by the time that came out, I'm overusing the word time, but I don't know how else to do it. I had begun working in radio. And I didn't know Fleetwood Mac put an album out in 1995. That is how much it died. I don't even remember seeing it in the delete bins. It's just like there wasn't enough even printed up to get cutouts. The Behind the Mask, I remember seeing that in the delete bins all the time because it did not sell. I mean, it went gold, but it didn't do what the previous records did. But the Time album was just a real like the nadir of their career. And I'm not sure about this, but I have to think that Warner Brothers went to, I'm going to say Mick Fleetwood, because he's sort of the keeper of the flame, and said, look, I don't care what you got to do. You get the best known lineup back together, or you're dropped. Can
Hmm.
you imagine a scenario if that hadn't happened? You might have had Fleetwood Mac recording albums for CMC or Sanctuary. You know what I mean? They may have been demoted to a smaller label. They were playing multi-act bills with bands that they would normally headline way above. They never had to share a stage with a bunch of bands. That's where they were at. That's how far down their star had fallen by the mid 90s. So the dance was, I mean, it was inevitable, I think, that they would reunite, but I have to think that brought it on a lot because if they'd continued to sell decent amounts of albums, the record label would be like, we don't care.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, because that was only 1987 when Tango and the Night came out, and then here you are in 1995, and they're about to be dropped from the record label. I mean, that's a real free fall for
Yeah,
anyone.
yeah, that's quite a drop in popularity. I mean, all around the world, that reached a high of 47 in the UK. It only produced one song called "I Do," which is a Christine song that charted anywhere in the world. It got to number 62 in Canada, of all things. Now,
Hmm.
there's one song on that album that I think is pretty good. It's not that one. It's one of Christine's songs, but I'll leave that for people that read the book. I think there's one saving grace on that album, and that is it.
Yeah.
Which really, when something like that happens, and one song is actually decent, it just makes the rest of it look even worse.
Do you cover the box set that they came out with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't go into compilations per se, but there is a section that I just call other songs. So any songs that weren't on one of the studio albums, I discuss in context of, for example, when the Greatest Hits came out in 1988, I talk about As Long as You Follow and No Questions Asked. And yeah, the 25 Years of the Chain, I talk about the four new songs that were on there and some of the unreleased stuff that first appeared on there, like Teen Beat or Trinity or the live version of Stand Back, which had never been on a Fleetwood Mac album, obviously, but it was from the Tango and the Night tour video. So, yeah, like I said, I try to cover all of the songs. One of the most annoying things about this to me is that 2013 EP that they put out that's never been released in physical form. Drives me nuts.
Hmm.
I almost didn't want to talk about it.
That'd be a great record store day release. Get something
I'm
like that on
I
physical.
I say in the book, I do not understand the logic with a band of that vintage and the median age of their fan base thinking that a digital only release is a good idea. So it was four new songs form, and they put that on the deluxe version. They put a best of out in 2018 called 50 Years Don't Stop. You have to get the deluxe version to get Sad Angel on a CD or a piece of vinyl. Other than that, those three other songs are just floating in limbo. And I've long said I don't pay for air. So if it doesn't come out physically, I'll never actually own it, which like I get that is such a thorn in my side because it's like, why? Why wouldn't you put it out? One of my theories is that they could still do this if they, if the stars aligned, they could have combined because that Buckingham McVie album from 2017 is only got 10 songs on it. It's a short album. It's a relatively easy listen. Look, put those four songs from the EP, mix it with the 10 songs, then you've got a little Stevie content and reissue it under the Fleetwood Mac banner. Bam. Then you've got a pretty good album.
Yeah. Now, being the eight-track guy that you are, do you have any discussion about the availability of eight tracks, or do you
A
stay
little
away
bit,
from
a
it?
little tiny bit. I don't want to bore people with that. I do talk about it when I talk about when the greatest hits came out in 1988 because that 88 greatest hits. I'm not talking about the old Peter Green one, but the 88 greatest hits that's got the green cover with the flower on it was released November 15th, 1988, the same day as Journey's greatest hits. And those two right there are said to be the last two eight tracks produced on a major label. Now, they were only available through a Columbia House. I've got the Journey one. I don't have the Fleetwood Mac one. That's as rare as it is to see the Journey one. It's even more rare to see the Fleetwood Mac one. I do have Tango in the Night, which I do have a picture of in the book. So I think that's pretty cool to have that from '87. As you, we did a live stream a few nights ago, and I talked about that.
Mhm.
But I also find that the early albums are really hard to find on 8 track, like especially the UK ones, like The Pious Bird of Good Omen and the The Blues, the 1969 Fleetwood Mac in Chicago, which is a confusing period unto itself. That's on two 8 tracks, and I can only find one. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about a few of the 8 tracks. But yeah, no, there's lots of great photos in there, and I tried to spread photos of the band, photos of some of the 45s, back covers, front covers. There's I wasn't going to really go into much detail with the cover art because, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, Fleetwood Mac have some of the most horrid album covers of a good band. Like they don't have, for the most part, really good album covers, and some of them are just really off-putting. Like Heroes Are Hard to Find is the main one. But I mean, English Rose and Mr. Wonderful. I mean, Mick Fleetwood had absolutely no problem dropping trowel for the camera.
Yeah, he was kind of like their mascot, even though he's
A
a
little
member of the
bit, yeah. I
band, he
mean,
also.
and it's funny that you mentioned that, and I found this out later. Apparently, the character of Animal on the Muppets was modeled after Mick Fleetwood. I always figured it was Keith Moon, but I guess it's Mick Fleetwood, and that makes sense because he just towers. He's a tall guy, and he just towers over the kid, and
Yeah.
he has the most crazed expressions when you watch. It could be a relatively mellow song, and he's all like.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he had one of those really animated faces. He could have been in
Yeah.
comedy or in Monty Python or something like
Well,
that.
it's funny. It's funny because he did act a little bit. If anybody remembers, he had a small part in The Running Man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of
Very
remember that.
a very small part. He was like the leader of the resistance that Schwarzenegger meets up with, and the other thing is like they named his character Mick. It's like you couldn't even come up with a
Uh,
different name. Yeah, and I think it was him and Dweezil Zappa. Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in years, but he is in it.
yeah. Now, how long did it take you to write this book? I mean, from the idea starting to put it together and then.
It's once I started diving into the albums, it actually didn't take that long. I've gotten to I'd like to think that at this point in time, and I mean, look, it amazes me that 5 years ago I had no books, now I have six, but it amazes me that I've kind of gotten into a rhythm now. And so I do an album, save it, back it up, save it, back it up, and then it's like making it make sense, putting it in some semblance of order. I had to write an introduction and then some thank yous and all of that, but um, not that long. I mean, a matter of a few months. And then the part that takes the longest is the proofreading, and then so I got to give my friend Andy Campbell a lot of credit for proofreading because I can't do it. I cannot I certainly can't proofread my own stuff, and I don't know many people that can. And as always, Matt Phillips from Go North Design. I mean, he didn't design the front cover, but he put the book together, and it looks great. And side by side, it fits right alongside all of my other books, except for
Hmm.
the Unspooled, which is kind of its own thing. And another section, one of my favorite parts of doing this book is, because it's just me, I didn't want it to be too short a read. I wanted to say everything I wanted to say, but I didn't want it to be just a real, I didn't want it to be a pamphlet or something. I wanted it to be an actual book with some content. So I came up with the idea of looking for because I mean, as we know, lots of people have covered Fleetwood Mac songs over the years. But I remember I just got to thinking, well, I wonder how many could I find? And so there is a chapter in the book that contains 100 different Fleetwood Mac songs covered by other artists, 100 different artists or groups too, so completely different,
Wow.
starting from the first album and going really all the way into the 2000s. Now, obviously, some albums are more heavily covered than others. I mean, Rumors has had at least one full tribute done to it. The band Camper Van Beethoven redid the whole Tusk album. So, but other than that, yeah, I was trying to find out, well, who covered songs from the Bob Welch era, and some of them really surprised me. Some of them I was not aware of at all, but it runs the gamut stylistically. It goes all the way from like traditional blues bands to metal bands to contemporary Christian bands to folk to dark wave, like all of these different genres covering Fleetwood
Hmm.
Mac. So, I mean, obviously their music spans so many genres and so many years. It makes sense that it would have an influence on so many generations of musicians, right? But that was a lot of fun putting that together. I've even got some foreign language versions of their songs mentioned there.
I assume you got the Judas Priest. Green
Oh yeah.
Monolith sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to point that out. Like, I mean, we're talking serious influence on all genres. And I mean, other people have done the Green Manalishi. I mean, just the other day, somebody sent me a clip of Arthur Brown, like Fire, uh,
Yeah.
doing the Green Manalishi from the 90s, and it's really good. It's
Hmm.
really good, but I mean, yeah, I had to mention the Judas Priest version. I mean, they did anybody that saw them at Live Aid, it became, I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. And I think a lot of people still to this day think Carlos Santana wrote Black Magic Woman. But nope,
Yeah.
that's a Fleetwood Mac cover. That's from the pen of Peter Green. Peter
Yeah.
Green was a visionary. I mean, he wasn't just a blues player. Like I said, with Then Play On, it started to develop into something else. And it was sort of tragic that that's where that run ended because he was a lot of those guys were troubled in some way or another, like him and Jeremy Spencer and Danny Kirwan. And Danny Kirwan is an unsung hero of Fleetwood Mac. I mean, he sort of kept the flame alive after Peter Green had left and then after Spencer had left. Um, Before, like, alongside of Bob Welch for a while. But another thing about their career is that very rarely, really until Buckingham Nicks era, there are a lot of albums where the lineup is unique to that album. I mean, they had Dave Walker from Savoy Brown on one
Hmm.
album, who later on, like Blink and You Missed It, was in Black Sabbath for a second, long enough to
Yeah.
film a
Yeah.
TV show, and then Ozzy came back one more time. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's I do cover like if you're expecting a particular cover version of a song, that's probably the one I went with. Um, and there are some, and I had to make it different because there are so many songs that have been covered too many times. You know what I mean? Like pick another
Mm-hmm.
song. Like we don't need another cover of Songbird, you know? And you're never going to better the chain, so don't try. Although I do
Mm-hmm.
have a pretty cool version of that mentioned by a Canadian band, but I'll leave
Sure.
that to the reader. But yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that really helped stretch the book out. And also it was educational for me. I had no idea about some of these instances of songs, and then you find out who actually played on them. And getting back to that Buckingham Nicks album for a second, that wasn't an indie release, so that was on Polydor. You had Keith Olsen producing. You had Waddy Wachtel. You had Jim Keltner. Like you had like session names playing on that thing, and it's just
Hmm.
interesting that it didn't do anything. And that's an album that would have been completely lost to obscurity, except for like real musicologists. Had those two not ended up in Fleetwood Mac, it would have been one of those the great lost albums or whatever. And it kind of still was, but people seem to know about it because every so many years there would be, oh, I think they're going to reissue it, and it would just never come to pass. Finally, it did.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do people find your book? Where can they buy it?
All of my books are at Amazon, whatever your local Amazon is. I've sold copies of this in Germany and the UK and Australia. So yeah, and you'll get it. I'm told that like in some cases the delivery is lightning fast. I know someone that ordered it and had it the next day. I said,
Hmm.
boy, you know, you must live next to a warehouse or something, like one of their warehouses. But yeah, all of my books, all people just have to type in Tim Durling on Amazon, and they should all come up. So yeah, and oh, by the way, I should mention this too. Um, all of my previous books have been lowered in price. So,
Oh,
and if
nice.
there's a couple that people want to catch up on, that might be a good way to do it. But I also am, with Fleetwood Mac, obviously I realize that by doing this, I'm casting a much wider net. So I'm really hoping I reach people that normally wouldn't, purchase my books. And it kind of goes against the grain of the bands because I tend to do books about bands that have no books written about them or very little written about them. Obviously, Fleetwood Mac, there's been a ton. I mean, Mick Fleetwood wrote his autobiography. I mean, even Bob Brunning, who was their original bass player, wrote a biography. But I think I put a unique spin on it, and I think it's different enough that people will get something out of it. And I'm hoping that it sends people back to especially those Bob Welch albums, because they're really most of them are really really good, and there's some great songs on there which could and should have been hit singles in their time. I have to think that the album covers were off-putting enough to keep people away, or even Bare Trees. I mean, what a bland album cover. Yeah, it's literal, but it doesn't have that pizzazz. I mean, really, when you think about it, even the Rumors album cover, I mean, is that art? We think it's great because the album's great and it's so iconic, but is it a great cover? I don't know. You know,
Yeah, I'm not
um,
so sure.
I think that one of their best album covers, and it's one of my favorite albums by them, is Tango in the Night. Okay, that's a piece of art. I get
Hmm.
it. But a lot of them are just bizarre. So I'm hoping
Yeah.
that people look past that and say, okay, I'm going to buy this anyway.
Yeah, like the one you showed. And I think like Kiln House has got a charm to it. And I think,
Yep.
Then Play On got
Yep.
that progressive vibe to it, which it should. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's more misses than hits on there. Do you have the next book in mind that you're
I've got two that are in the works. You're in one of them,
Mhm.
and it's going to be obviously it's going to be another panel book. But then the one after that is another one that I'm doing myself. And I think I've got a couple other things in mind that I want to do past that, but I haven't started writing anything yet because I can only I can only get so many plates spinning.
Hmm.
So right now I'm in kind of full promo mode for this book, but yeah, I don't see any reason to stop. So.
Okay. Well, enjoyed the book. I'm gonna get my copy today. I've enjoyed all your books to this point, so I know I'm gonna love the Fleetwood Mac one. But always enjoy having you on here and plugging your books, which, like I say, are fantastic. So much success. Have you had a lot of sales so far? How are things going
For
on
for
Amazon?
you know, because thank you, Jeff. Considering that it hasn't even been on sale for a week, yeah, doing really well.
Good, good. All right. Well, Tim Durling again, and don't forget Tim's got his own channel, Tim's Vinyl Confessions, where you can learn all about Fleetwood Mac, Kansas, Night Ranger, Def Leppard, hard rock bands from the 80s. He's your go-to guy. Love having you on. Thanks so much, Tim.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate the support and folks, don't forget, Jeff's got his own books out, and he's more prolific than I am. He's putting out books all the time, and I really really love his new one.
Well, thank you so much for that. All right. Take care.